Welcome to the Focus and Chill podcast, where we discuss productivity tactics that work for neurodivergent individuals.
Every episode, we interview guests with lived experience of neurodiversity who also have a solid productivity and habit game, and pass the learnings on to you, our wise and benevolent audience.
We're your hosts, Jeremy and Joey.
I'm Joey, and I coach creatives to get moving on their most ambitious projects through the power of solid habits and strong focus. I'm also a perpetual student of psychology and perpetually on a quest to a one-armed chin-up.
And I'm Jeremy, a neurospicy software developer turned startup founder, building the Focus Bear app to help people with ADHD and autism thrive at work. My cool party trick is leaving parties early so I can get to sleep in time for my 2-hour-long morning routine. Welcome to episode number 108 of Focus and Chill. I'm thrilled to be joined by Nuria Melchor Fernández today. Nuria is passionate about supporting neurodivergent individuals, particularly those with ADHD, autism, and complex trauma. She has navigated love addiction recovery through 12-step programs and trauma focus groups, which inspired her to create mutual aid groups for neurodivergent peers in Spain. With a deep love for psychology and trauma recovery, she shares tools and insights to foster connection, resilience, and self-acceptance. Welcome to the show, Nuria.
Oh, that's such a beautiful intro. Thank you so much, Jeremy.
Well, you did write it yourself. I agree.
Oh, I did write it myself. I didn't even remember.
Or maybe we wrote it based on something that you gave us.
Gotcha.
Very nice intro. So keen to hear more about how you got to this point of being an advocate for autistic and ADHD people.
Right. Oh my. So the 12-step recovery journey started before that. So I didn't know that I had autism and ADHD at that point. That was almost like 7 years ago, something like that. So I realized that I had trauma. But then when I started to treat both of them, it became more obvious that there was something more. I remember someone in 12-step recovery saying, I think you might be ADHD. And I was like, there's no way. Like, I have such a, I rebooked, so I have no trouble focusing. I don't know what you're talking about. And, it was about kind of like actually learning what it really meant. Because I do think that the name of the neurodiversity is kind of like wrong. But anyhow, it sent me down a path of healing enough the other two things that I was like, okay, I'm still really struggling. Like, what's beneath that, right? So yeah, that's how it started. And then the autism thing was when I did deal with the ADHD and I was kind of medicated for it, I became a little bit more autistic. And also my best friend got diagnosed and we're very similar. So I was like, again, like the first impression was like, are you insane? Like, you're very, you're not like Rain Man. So I don't think you have autism. I was like the first person like that it's very invalidating and like, this is, BS, like. But then again, like just he was sending me info my way about autism. And I little by little was like, oh yeah, I think there might be something about it in you. And then he was like, whoa, we're kind of similar in women's. I kind of manifest in this other way, and women's phenotype. And I was like, oh, well, yeah, another label. I had a meeting with a psychiatrist in the public mental health in Spain. And I told her about all my diagnoses, right? Like the love addiction, the trauma, ADHD, autism. I also have POTS, POTS. I think it's called, right. So, and she was like, are you collecting diagnoses or like, why do you need so many labels? And I was like, no, you don't understand. Like, how am I supposed to fix the problem if I don't know what the problem is, right? Mm-hmm. But somehow she thought that it was almost like, I don't know, I'm a hypochondriac or something, and I just want to get attention. I don't know.
Yeah, I've had reactions like that as well. And I guess some people have concerns that if you call yourself a certain thing, then you're going to fall down to that level. But I think the experience for me, at least, is it actually gives me more self-compassion and it helps me to identify peers and a community that I can be part of. And it's really been a positive thing. Has it been like that for you?
Oh, 120%. They do say that, and I've been in groups with fathers and mothers of autistic or ADHD people, and they're like, oh, I don't know if I should tell them because, that's going to limit them in their life and what they think they can do. And I'm like, well, we've been, trying to discuss in a more politically correct way. But like, basically the idea is that if you don't give them that label, they will get other much worse labels. Like I was seen as the lazy kid, the weird kid, so it's almost like, okay, there's something wrong with me. I just don't even know what it is. And when you do understand that what's wrong with you, it's a neurodiversity, and that there are other people like you, as you said, and that you connect so quickly with them, right? Like you have such a hard time in the world. Then when you meet someone like you, it's almost like you're back home, and you understand each other without even having to speak. Like we're friends, and maybe, I contact you once a week, once a month, because I just don't have enough spoons, right? Like I don't have enough energy to keep this going and like talking every single day and like doing the rest of life's demands. So yeah, I don't know. It really was personally a blessing to know, to have that information.
That's great. And the point before that of getting or collecting, as the psychiatrist called it, the multiple diagnoses, was that a positive experience overall in the Spanish system?
With psychology and psychiatry, you mean?
Yeah.
Oh boy, that's another whole can of worms. Oh my gosh, there's so many ways that the conversation could go. First of all, RFK Jr.'s comments about how there's an epidemic on autism, right? And that's the way that it feels in Spain as well, because we haven't been detecting any of the women, any of the people that have like double exceptionality, like people with both autism and ADHD, giftedness. So they kind of like compensate, or they just have more ability to mask. When you're a woman, usually you have lots of social pressure. So they just don't know anything about autism or ADHD. It's very rare to find someone in the public system that knows about it. There's a specific unit in a certain hospital in Barcelona that is supposed to be specializing on that. But it seems like they're just helping the children. If you're an adult, that's it. Sorry. You go and find yourself a private therapist if you can afford it. And if not, then bad luck. I don't know how it's the situation in Australia. Honestly, there are so many people that are just getting misdiagnosed, especially if you're a woman. Usually will have that you are BPD. And if you have trauma, there is an overlap with both, autism and BPD. So yeah, like it's just very hard to get to the real diagnosis. And while you're thinking that you're BPD, like, it's just, it's really tough out there.
Yeah. Well, I'm glad that you've been able to find a tribe of people who are supportive now.
Yeah. And it also helps to kind of like exchange resources, right? When you find people who already, they've done the work, they've been around and tried this psychologist and this psychiatrist and this and that. And so it's almost like we share that well of knowledge, right? Like just, okay, where do you want to go if you don't want to get invalidated and you want to be understood? And so, yeah, I actually really treasure that as well.
Now, talking about complex trauma, I'm really keen to hear about something that you wrote to me in the ideas for what we might discuss around how complex trauma intersects with neurodivergence. Can you tell us a bit about that, when you came to be aware of that and some of the things to be mindful of?
Okay, so the main idea about that is that there really is such an overlap between, at least, and both with ADHD as well. Like there is this thing that, at least in my company, we call it brain fog, right? And it's when you have so much anxiety and trauma, and it just makes it really hard to focus, because you're in that survival mode. So it's just hard. But in autism is especially hard to distinguish from trauma, especially if the trauma is very early on. It's almost like there are some signs, right, that it might be at least like both, or just trauma, like the sensory issues and some of the difficulties with interactions or adapting to certain environments or things like that, and questioning a lot, like about hierarchies and things like that, like, just questioning a lot. But the main thing is that if it happens very early on, it's really like there's no a real process that you can go through and be like, no, yeah, it definitely is just autism and you don't have trauma, or it's just trauma and you don't have autism. So yeah, it's a big challenge for psychologists to really know, and for people to know whether they have, but it usually does coincide actually, that when you are neurodivergent, because you're different and because probably it is in your genetics as well. So your parents and grandparents, someone there was also neurodivergent and was struggle with certain things. So it's more likely that you do have trauma.
And that makes me think of, there's two books that have touched on it. One is called Stolen Focus, and the other one, I forget the name of the author, but he wrote about his own diagnosis of ADHD, and he pins a lot of it on early childhood trauma. And I think that is maybe informative, but also it feels like it then creates blame on the parents. And do you have thoughts on that? Because I guess maybe there is a causatory link, but I imagine there's also a genetic link. And then you were talking before about if you don't get a label of autism, you might get a label of being weird or lazy and things like that. And for me, that was definitely part of my own story of getting a lot of bullying in high school. Do you think there's a combination of the two, that it's partly causatory, but also partly that society does to neurodivergent people because we're not accepted, or we haven't been accepted to this date?
Yeah, first of all, I'm sorry about the bullying. It's one of the causes of trauma if you don't have someone that is there for you. But I wanted to say that it kind of doesn't even matter whether it is trauma or neurodivergence. You just want to try as many tools as you can. ADHD has so many tools to heal from trauma. You get so many modalities and things to try out, and just find the ones that work for you. On the main subject of the question, there's also the book by Gabor Mate.
That's the one I'm thinking of. Yeah.
Oh, got it.
That
Yeah,
one
it's
too.
the best known one, right? And I love Gabor Mate. I really I love compassionate inquiry. I think he has this other modality to tackle trauma that it's very laser focused and useful. However, when he does say things like that everything comes from trauma, I think that it's almost like I don't know, we had like a saying in Spain that it's like, once you have a hammer, everything looks like a nail. You kind of like use the same approach. So I think he might not be very knowledgeable in that area, maybe. And that's why he sees it that way, only from the trauma perspective instead of neurodivergence. But yeah, I do think that ultimately it's almost like just about what works for you. And so, yeah, imagine that you do get a wrong diagnosis with ADHD. Like, does it really limit you? Like, honestly, I don't think so. Like, I now know myself better from that lens, right? That I do have periods of hyper focus. I do have times that I lose my keys and appointments and taking pills and all of these things that I really struggle with. And it's okay because I found also like ways to compensate for that, or just deal with it and be as functional as I can.
Yeah, and I liked what you said about it's not necessarily, well, maybe I'm reading into it too much, but the way that I interpret that is it may be less useful for me to try and figure out what was the cause of what made me the person I am today versus what are some tools that can help. Because there's a lot of discussion around emotional lability or emotional dysregulation as being one of the unrecognized traits of ADHD. And I wonder about how trauma might actually be affecting that there, and some of the trauma-informed tools might actually help with the emotional dysregulation. Because that's probably the part that's hardest for me to deal with. I do lose my keys from time to time, but the thing that is most troubling for me is when I overreact to situations that don't justify overreacting.
And I think it's very mixed with the impulsivity factor in ADHD. When I got the test, I had impulsivity over here. So it was like a big deal for me. And so, of course, it's going to be, I don't want to say overreacting, because it's almost like you do have that tendency to just jump, right? Whatever happens, it's like, I watch a movie. It's such a stupid example, but like I watch a sad movie, or I do see, I don't know, like a crushed snail in the street, and I'm like, oh my gosh, like, the saddest thing ever. And it's like, okay, well, let's put it into perspective, right? Of reality. Or, someone says something that kind of like makes me angry, and I'm like, oh, I just jump with that. What I would say that helps me the most with that, it's both, especially grounding, right? So I don't know if you've heard about any of those techniques about the 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, like just focusing basically on your environment. So what can I see right now? I can see a window. I can see, a table. I can see you on the screen, a tablet. What are some of the things that I can hear? I can hear the cars on the street. I can hear my own voice. So it's kind of like bringing it down, right? Even as I am doing this, I am grounding myself for real, because it's almost like, oh, I am here. Like I'm not in any threatening situation. I used to have very bad social phobia, so that's what I'm also saying this. And so it's just, bringing yourself back into the moment. I think it's the most useful short term. And then long term is, I would say, there are so many, just examining why you react to certain things. But then it's more based about the trauma, or not even that, like just emotional intelligence, right? Where you're like, okay, so usually when someone invalidates me or like says something that I feel like I'm not being listened to, that triggers me. Okay, why does that trigger you? And what can you do about it? And like, maybe I can be like, Jeremy, you know what? Like the other day you did this and it triggered me. So I don't know if we could try, like, could you be a little bit more soft with me, or like say things in a certain way? So it's just work all over, right? In yourself, with others, just, there's a lot.
I apologize for my negative comment, whatever I said the other day.
You did nothing wrong.
But yeah, I get the idea. It sounds a bit like the nonviolent communication approach as well, that stating the need and trying to say it in a way that isn't going to be perceived badly by the other person.
It is kind of hard to do that, because we are very used to the, you did this, and of course you
always.
It's a different paradigm as well.
I like that. I was having a dose of the you always and you blah, blah, blah about a situation earlier today. Grounding actually helped, because I was riding my bike and I was hearing the ruminating thoughts. And then I tried to just look out into the ocean, and because I was riding next to the sea, and I looked at some boats and I felt calmer, and I felt my hands on the steering, on the handlebars and things like that. So it's a good reminder.
And the best part about that is that actually then you can discern like how much is from your past, how much is actually about the current situation, how much maybe like the person that you have in front of you that has been mistreating you has been doing it consistently and has no intention to actually change. And maybe you just need to see things more clearly, basically.
Yeah, absolutely. Talking about things that happened in the past, I think I skipped over a question or a point that we had here about explaining to people who aren't familiar what complex trauma is and how it's different from a single traumatic event.
Right. So usually when we think about trauma, we think,
car accident.
I was trying like not to go into the whole, war and like being raped or like, really huge trauma that happens, right? Like that's the difference between complex and simple. And as you said, like it could be something as a car accident, right? But after that, it's almost like, oh my gosh, I can't take a car now because, this is going to happen again. Trauma, the thing that we usually have is that it's repeated. So we're talking about examples like domestic violence, or when you're a child, like being neglected, right? Like not getting your needs met consistently enough. bullying. That's enough, like it's repeated. It's not like just one time they did this to you, or it's just day after day. And I think there's also like that component that you can't run away from the situation. It's not like, you can quit school usually, or that you can leave your parents, like you're unfit to parent me clearly. So I'm just, packing my bags and going, which is fortunate. But yeah, it's just like this exposure to something that, and especially when you are a child and your whole personhood or like personal, you're just developing your brain and your person, everything is kind of developed. And so during those formative years, you're so vulnerable. So of course, especially if the person that was supposed to take care of you is the one that it's actually harming you, it really affects you a lot.
And then that obviously has impacts that go on to later life as well.
Actually, it's kind of like the car accident, right? Like once you have a car accident, you just want to avoid getting into another car accident. And in trauma, it's more insidious, I feel, because it always happens in a relationship with someone else. The mindset that you develop is, I cannot trust anybody. I might have been responsible for what happened to me in some way. So lots of false guilt and things like that. The worst part is that you do need the relational element to heal. So, on one hand, you're kind of like, no, I don't want to go through that again. And on the other hand, you're like, I kind of need to if I want to heal. And you don't have the tools to recognize what healthy looks like. You can just get burned again and again until you actually, just by sheer luck, like you find someone that is healthy and you're like, oh, this is what healthy looks like. Like everything that I've been going through, it was familiar. It was in a way comfortable, because it was familiar. And this new thing, it feels different, feels good, but at the same time, it feels bad. There's a lot of confusion. It's hard to navigate.
Yeah, 100%. On the relationship front, I don't know the research behind it. You probably do, but it seems like it's common for people to be attracted to people who are possibly like abusers earlier in their life. And what you were saying there around finding that comfortable and that it seems to keep happening. I think that I had experiences like that in my earlier relationships, mainly around, I guess, emotional neglect. And maybe that was something that felt comfortable to me from childhood. But do you have any thoughts or things to share around that as to what the reason why it might repeat?
Oh man, it's so upsetting, honestly. Like the fact that it's almost like you're set up for failure, basically, in relationship. I can so identify, like for me, it was neglect and abuse. And so it wasn't even a conscious decision of, I like this person because they are being neglectful and abusive to me. It was almost like, this feels familiar. This feels comfortable. I know what to expect of this person. And almost being, honestly, just rejecting anything that is different from that. Because it's unknown and it's weird. And it's like, I don't know how to navigate this. And especially like, oh my gosh, what if they find out who I am? And, I'm a piece of whatever. So they're going to leave me. And I do actually admire these people. Like I actually prefer to stay with the abusive guy that, I'm the best thing that ever happened to him and that he's not going to leave me, especially. It sounds horrible saying it aloud, but I think that there was a lot of that unconsciously going of just the main thing to avoid is to be rejected. And so whatever crumbs you can give me, I'll be fine, as long as I have those little crumbs. And then you don't actually say to me that I'm not, leave me and then like completely confirm that I am abusive, whatever.
Yeah. And I imagine sometimes it might involve addiction as well, that it might be that the abuse is also like Jekyll and Hyde, that sometimes the other person is really, really lovely and nice, and then the other times they're not. And it's very hard then to reconcile that, because then it's just hoping that they're going to be the nice person today and not knowing when it's going to happen.
It's crazy making. honestly. And I think the worst part of that is that I was always wondering what it was that I had done wrong, because that's the mindset that I grew up with, right? Like, my mom is getting angry because obviously something I did. So if you went from love bombing and like, you're the best thing and blah, 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 you're the worst that happened to me and you're responsible for everything that is going bad in my life. Okay, let's fix it. You know, what can I do to, there's also like the codependent part of me that it's like, oh, I can save you as well. Like, there's so many magical thinking and lies that go into that whole, thing, that it's really hard to kind of like pick them apart, because they're all kind of like enmeshed together. So yeah, it's just really hard to change that way of relating and looking for those people. There's also that theory of repetition compulsion. I don't know if you heard of it.
No.
Okay, so basically it's the idea that you're kind of recreating your upbringing or whatever situation that created the trauma, but this time you'll get it right. Again, with my mom, right? Example. So my mom was autistic. She didn't know. She almost seemed narcissistic at times because her needs came first. She was trying to survive, basically. And so she wasn't ready to be a mom. And she didn't know any better. But the thing is that she would just, unload on me. So I did feel like that was my fault. And so just bringing it into the, past relationships, like just, again, like just, of course it would be my fault. And hopefully this time I can do something different and end up in a happy ending. I'll take all of that trauma and we'll turn it into pure love. And like, I will finally get my mom's love because I did the right thing, It's just, but it's unconscious. Like, you just keep going back and like being like, this time is gonna be the time that I turn this. And I usually will bring up the example of the Beauty and the Beast, right? Because it's like almost like he's so tough and like then she loves on him and he changes and he becomes the prince, right? Like, that's kind of like thinking going on in this situation. So yeah, it's just hard to see it when you don't have anybody else to kind of reflect. Like, that's actually one of the things that it's made most impact in my life. It's having people to kind of like bounce back ideas. Okay, so this happened to me and he said this and I said this, and like, was I being selfish for saying that? Or just kind of like seeing things with fresh eyes, like objective, well, as objective as it can be, like from a situation that you are immersed in. So yeah, lots of stuff.
Yeah, and that probably brings us to how to get out of that situation. You talked then about having someone to be a sounding board. We're going to take a quick break, and then I'm keen to hear about the kinds of trauma therapy and interventions that might help for neurodivergent people. The Focus and Chill podcast is brought to you by Focus Bear, a focus enhancement app for ADHDers. That's adults with both combined autism and ADHD. I'm Jeremy, I'm an ADHDer myself. I'm the founder of Focus Bear and also one of the hosts of this podcast. I built Focus Bear for myself originally because I was constantly getting distracted by my phone and my laptop. I wanted a way to tame my ADHD monkey mind, so I'd stop going down rabbit holes and actually get work done, but also get off my computer and my phone in the evening so I'd be able to sleep properly. It's working perfectly for me, and it's helping a lot of ADHDs as well. I'd love for you to try it. It's available for Mac, Windows, iOS, and Android, and it leverages most of the productivity strategies we talk about on the podcast. You can jump onto focusbear.io or just Google Focus Bear and try it out. Let me know what you think. All right, so we're back now and keen to hear about the types of trauma therapy that you found actually work for neurodivergent people.
Yeah, so basically there are two modalities that are kind of like different in their approach. We're more used to the top-down modalities, which is like talk therapy and things like that. And then there is the bottom-up, which is more like somatic, like based on the body, connecting with nature, things like that. The one that I found was useful, it's internal family systems. And I think that it really helps with autistic people and ADHD people, because it's very like, it helps to clarify what exactly is happening inside, right? Like you become acquainted with different parts of you that are either trying to control the environment to make it a certain way so that you don't get triggered. So, you have like an inner critic, right? That it's going to criticize you before anybody gets the chance to. Or trying to, like the codependent part, right? Like it's just like, okay, I'm going to be here for you. And then you're going to be there for me. And we're going to both get our needs met, right? And everything is going to be peachy. And then we've got some firefighters, which is like, basically it's the idea that when something really, really triggering happens, you just go to whatever you can find to find comfort. So that would include overeating, drugs, any substance or process addictions. I also think that it's very important both for autistic and ADHD people, because with the ADHD people, it's almost like, or at least my ADHD part, it keeps forgetting that there are certain parts that will do certain things. And it's almost like it comes out of the blue, right? And I'm like, why did I react that way? And so it's almost like useful to be aware of all the parts and what they are likely to do in different scenarios, also for the autistic part, because it's almost like I need to know what's going to happen. I need to know what's inside. What are the different ways that I can react to a situation so that I'm more prepared in a way. So that would be, honestly, the one that works best for me. And clients that I have that are artistic, it seems to be working really well. Then we have
Can I ask with that, are there any positive parts of that? It sounded like there's the firefighter, which sounds pretty maladaptive a lot of the time, and the codependent part, which also doesn't sound helpful, and the inner critic, that definitely doesn't sound good. Is there a good part of the internal family?
That's such a good question, Jeremy, and thank you so much for not allowing me to paint this picture of just dysfunctional family inside. There are so many. And you know what? Like even the bad parts usually will have, let's just talk about a specific example, because I think it will be very, very illustrative. I have this very people pleasing part, right? It's like, I just want to make you happy, like, and it comes from, okay, so there is the maladjustive part, which is like, I'm going to put your needs ahead of mine. But it also comes from, I get so much joy from seeing people being happy. Like it's genuine. There's a part there that it's like, of course I want to have, you to have a good time. And I want to, I don't know, like think of gifts that actually matter to you. And, just, it does come from a warm and good part. And then of course there are a creative part that looks for things to create and explore. And then there's an intellectual part that is the debater, right? Like, okay, let's have a conversation and let's get into it and try to bounce ideas back and forth and see what's true and what's not and how to see things from different angles. So obviously there are good parts. And I think it's actually quite good to see the whole system and really understand where each part comes from, because there's always a good intention, even in the firefighters, as I was saying, like, yeah, of course they're going to look for addictions and things to cover up for the pain, but that's to protect me. Doesn't mean that now I want to, I know that now I have more tools, so I don't have to, go and use drugs to feel better. So it's kind of like integrating all those parts. And just, I think that the same way that we feel better when we are accepting of ourselves, like, words and all, it's kind of good to accept the parts and have that more compassionate view of yourself, like just coming from curiosity and understanding and all of that.
Okay, so those were the top-down approaches. Do you want to talk more about the bottom-up approaches and the integrative models?
Yeah, for sure. So there's a lot of different techniques, and you can research them on the internet to have a better understanding of all the different modalities. One that it's been useful for me as well is the polyvagal modality, which entails doing different exercises that trigger the vagus nerve. So we have the parasympathetic and the sympathetic mode. And so when we get overloaded, we just want to bring it back to more relaxed, right? And so that's one of the techniques that it's used. obviously especially for autistic people, I think the deep pressure can be really helpful, right? When you ask someone for a strong hug, or you get a weighted blanket, or, all of those things could be bottom-up approaches. Then there is dance and movement therapy. There is a mixture of both modalities, which I think are very interesting as well. One of them is EMDR. It's the eye movement desensitization thing. There's something else that people can learn to do on their own, which is called tapping. This is very helpful as well, because you can be talking about a certain traumatic experience or something that is very charged. And because your brain has that uncertainty of dealing with a lot, you're overwhelmed. But if you tap yourself in a certain way with a certain rhythm, and at least the brain knows what to expect from there, and it's kind of like connecting both hemispheres and everything, it just helps to be able to talk through it and kind of like integrate it in a different way. So another modality is art, or, expressive therapy. So anything that has to do with art therapy is just, any time that you are making something with whatever painful experience that you had and things like that, it's almost like transcending them, right? So I used to be a great fan of writing. So I would create like these stories that took my trauma and then ended in a different way, in a positive way, right? Where finally I got the ending that I wanted. So that was kind of cathartic, things like that. So it's just creating from that point of view.
I like that idea. And it's great to know there's so many different modalities, because my experience has been going to some therapists or psychologists and finding that the person or who I was at that point or the style didn't work for me, but I've found then switching to a different person or a different style has resonated a lot more. And it's great that we're going to include the list of different options that you suggested that are generally helpful for neurodivergent people. But even within that, there's going to be so much individual variation that I might like a certain style and other people prefer a different way.
Exactly. And that's the best thing, that, especially if you go to a company that has different sets of psychologists with different modalities, right? Like you get a list to try different things and seeing what works. So I would highly recommend that. And then I wanted to recommend a specific resource that was super helpful for me in that kind of like art therapy modality. And it's The Artist's Way by Julia Cameron. That was the first experience that I had with self-compassion and looking at some of my issues. I think it's based on her experience with AA as well, like 12 steps and that kind of a thing. For anybody that's kind of creative, that's one of the resources that I would recommend for sure.
Absolutely. There's so much more that we could go into, but we've got a limited time for this episode. So we'll end it by asking for how people can be connected with you and any programs that they could be involved in that you run.
Right. So basically, there is my social networks, Instagram, LinkedIn. Yeah, I think that's pretty much everything. The problem is that I do run the groups in Spanish right now, but I would be totally down for any English one. When you mentioned the one that you have, I was like, ooh, I'm going to be following up on you, because it is so great to find other autistic people and have different groups and just get that variety. So if you want to reach out, feel free. Whatever I can help you with, I'll be happy to.
Do you want to briefly describe how the mutual aid groups work, the one that you've set up?
So basically, in Spain, we have a very boundaried way of doing GAMs. Honestly, the thing that we're doing right now, it's almost like just having a topic of conversation. Let's say, I don't know, one time it's been diagnosis, or how was your experience with diagnosis and the difficulties so just sharing about whatever topic. And I usually will be kind of like, because I do have experience facilitating the group, so just validating the experience, and that's pretty much it. Creating those relationships between us and having those opportunities to meet each other.
And in Australia, there's some groups like that on meetup.com. So in whatever area you're in, If you're in Spain, then go to Nuria's one, and in other areas, look for a local one. I found it so wonderful being able to find local community.
Amazing.
Well, it's been fantastic having you on. Thanks so much.
Thank you so much, Jeremy.
Thanks for tuning in to this episode of the Focus and Chill podcast. To listen to other episodes, jump onto podcast.focusbear.io. If you'd like to be a guest on the show, or you know someone who'd be a good fit, email us at team@focusbear.io. Otherwise, stay focused, stay chilled, and peace out.